Good day. We move now to lesson 5 and lesson 6. But before we move forward, please take note that there are announcements about our face-to-face meeting next Friday at 1:30 p.m. So I'll make an announcement. Please just take note of it. Okay? So sorry. Welcome to lesson 5, where we explore the foundation of rigorous quantitative research, and that includes proper sampling techniques and survey design. Understanding these principles transforms raw data collection into meaningful, generalizable insights. So, meet Alex. He's a graduate student with an intriguing research question. Does the number of hours of students study per week predict their exam scores? Excited about this hypothesis, Alex creates a survey and distributes it to his 10 closest friends. He analyzes the data, discovers a correlation, and proudly presents his findings. His advisor's response to this one is quite intriguing. This data tells me about your friends group, not the entire population. Your sampling is biased. Uh, Numbers can appear powerful, precise correlations, neat graphs, statistical significance, but the foundation matters. What is that foundation we're talking about? Today, we'll learn how to properly build quantitative studies through sampling and even through survey design. Remember, without representative sampling and carefully designed surveys, those numbers are actually useless, even empty, because they do not reflect what they should reflect. And that's something you have to pay attention to, no? That the data should actually reflect what it intends to reflect or it intends to show or demonstrate. Why sampling matters? Quantitative research basically aims or focuses on generalization. We want to make claims about an entire population, not just the handful of people we happen to know. This fundamental goal requires that our sample accurately represents the population we're studying. And that's the reason why we always need to get a representative size or a sample size. There are many ways to compute the sample size, like for example, Slovin's or what will later on be defined as Yamani's technique for sampling. I will discuss this more fully in the face-to-face, but that's something you have to pay attention to. And then you have to implement a randomized sampling design. And everything that you see here, random sampling, simple random sampling, uh, stratified random sampling, cluster random sampling, and systematic random sampling are all randomized samplings. When we say random sampling, every individual is given the equal opportunity to be chosen. This is the gold standard, though often difficult to achieve in practice. That's why there's a percent of error, 5% or 10% error. But you also need to pay attention that this is what the sampling presupposes. That's why sometimes there's a table of random numbers, or if there's no table of random numbers, we actually incorporate other means to figure this out. Like, for example, a fishbowl technique where you put all the names there and start choosing and things like that. Stratified random is when you divide the population into smaller groups such as male and female or freshmen and seniors, then randomly sample within each stratum, mimicking the exact percentage of the total sample. So for example, there are 60% male and 40% women, and there are 10 sample size. That means there will be 6 male and 4 women in the stratified random style. Cluster is when you select entire groups such as whole classrooms or schools instead of individual participants, uh, and that's when you're interested with very huge groups. But also you'd see this one in the SWSS or the other big surveys in the country. But in that they implement a more systematic sampling design where you take every nth person on the list, every 10th student, and the like, no? Each method, you have to understand, reduces bias and even strengthens your ability to generalize your findings beyond your immediate sample because everybody was given the equal opportunity to be chosen. That's what you have to pay attention there. Now, next, survey as research tool, no? Survey as research tool. Surveys are among the most common instruments in quantitative research, yet they are frequently misused or poorly designed. A well-constructed survey is a precise instrument that bridges your research question to analyze data. It bridges. Eventually, on the face-to-face, on the first session, I will explain this. That's why you have to be there, or if you're not able to join, hopefully we can get access to the pre-recordings, or you can request the research office of the school for the pre-recording. Now, there are certain characteristics of a strong survey, no? Like clear, concise questions that participants can easily understand, like your faculty evaluation. There's just one-liners there. Each item aligns directly with your research variables or what you have to want to measure. The scale allows you for statistical analysis. Mostly these are Likert type scales or Likert type scales. You avoid irrelevant, ambiguous, or double-barreled questions, no ends, no buts, or ors. And the logical flow and appropriate length to maintain engagement is there. So you don't ask 500 questions or else you lose your respondents on the 100 question, di ba? Now, going back to Alex, example, you remember he's interested. You don't ask study time per week. That's very open-ended. You can get a response that says 5 minutes to 40 hours, something like that. So you have to be very clear. So you can say on average, how many hours per week do you study for this class? Something like that. Or for for dependent variable, you cannot simply say exam performance, that's very poor. You actually consider, do you like studying, why or why not, and things like that. Remember, a survey is only good as its alignment, no? The research question, the variables, the survey items, and the analysis. Your questions will depend largely on this one. That's the reason why you have to attend that discussion on the PIRC talks about the first part will be the conceptualization phase, where we will see the alignment between the research questions, variables, and also questionnaires. And then that's on the 17th. And then on the 24th, again on the same time, there's a second lecture on operationalization, which I hope you'd also attend. Okay. Uh, Now, building on solid ground. Numbers, you have to understand, can impress, but they can also mislead. A survey with poor sampling or vague questions is like a house built on sand. It looks fine until you test its strength. The appearance of numerical precision can mask fundamental flaws in research design. When evaluating quantitative research, and we will study some in the operationalization phase, no? The most famous one is the experimental model. But you can also start reading Frankel and Wallen, How to Design and Evaluate Research in Education. That book, that's a very important book for if you're really interested with quantitative and qualitative research. No, due to the classes mixed nature of it's very difficult to presume that you already know these things. Quanti and quali, for example, already presupposes you can conceptualize, but can you conceptualize? That's the next question that we need to ask. So when evaluating quantitative research, whether your own or others, always ask yourself, Does the sample represent the population? Do the survey items measure what they claim to measure? Remember, a survey is not a random collection of questions. There's an alignment there. Question, concept, dimensions, indicators. There's an alignment there. It is a deliberate, disciplined instrument tied directly to your research design. Therefore, rigor in quantitative research comes from careful planning, conceptualization, thoughtful design, conceptualization, and systematic execution, operationalization. Every choice matters, from sampling strategy to question wording. All of those are very important. For lesson 5, your Canvas task is to draft your survey. Look at your research questions. Return to your quantitative research questions from the first lesson, and then identify your key variables clearly. Uh, Design 5 to 7 survey items. So create questions that directly measure your variables. From question number 1, I said describe first, diba? Ensure clarity, avoid bias, and use appropriate skills. And for survey items, my suggestion is you check faculty evaluation sheets or forms, because they give you the ideal one-liners. And where do these one-liners come from? From the definition of dimensions. And when we measure the dimensions, you measure the concept. Check alignment, verify that each items connect to your research questions and will provide analyzable data. To do that, you have to show the question, the dimension, the RRL definition, and then the indicators that came from it. No? And submit your work next week, because these lessons came in rather late this week because of many things. So please do that. Okay, format it as a Word file, because you'll not just submit this task, but also lesson 6, which I'm already putting on board. Lesson 6 will talk about qualitative sampling and also the interview questions or interview guides. No? Meet Laila. Sorry, she's in the dark. A graduate student exploring how students experience online learning. Coming from a quantitative background, she assumes she'd need hundreds of participants. If quantitative studies need large samples, surely quantitative studies need just as many. She thought panicking at the prospect of conducting 200 interviews, for example. That's just impossible. And her advisor smiled, Laila, qualitative research is about depth, not numbers. 10 or 12 carefully chosen participants may tell you more than 200 rushed interviews ever could. Key insight. The heart of qualitative sampling is insight, lalim, over depth, over breadth. Quality of experience matter more than quantity of participants. So how do qualitative sampling work? No, if in quantitative sampling we do randomized sampling, here it's non-random sampling. So while qualitative research seeks representation across a population, qualitative research seeks richness of experience and depth of understanding. So the sampling strategies reflect this fundamental difference, especially in purpose. So for example, purposeful sampling, that's a deliberate choosing where participants with specific relevant experiences illuminate your research question. Purposive sampling or purposeful sampling. Purposive, they're selected because of their qualification. No? They're qualified. They know something about what you're studying. That's why they are chosen. That's what it means. Okay. Next, maximum variation. No. When we say maximum variation, this is capturing a wide variety, even to the point of saturation. That's very important. It needs to be saturated. So capturing a wide variety of perspectives to understand the full range of experiences. If I spoke about fishbowl technique in quantitative research, here in qualitative research, we speak of snowball sampling, no? Snowballing, no? Kung yun yung, that's what we are calling it, snowballing, no? And this is where one participant refers another, particularly useful for hard to reach population. So there is an endorsement of sorts where you're just passed on from one person to another. That's what it means, no? Snowball. And then theoretical sampling, adjusting participants as new teams emerge during analysis, common in grounded theory. No, that's theoretical sampling. As you move forward, you look for people who will play a significant role. There are more qualitative sampling designs. There's also the convenience sampling, which is also like very much like snowballing. But convenience is really those that are easily accessible. So if the purposeful sampling is those who are especially qualified in uh, convenience sampling, those are easily accessible. So in qualitative work, the key question is not so much how many, but the question there is who and even why. Who and why. Please take note. Who and why. Okay? Your sampling strategy should be driven by your research purpose, not simply arbitrary numerical targets. No, that's the difference there. So if the survey questions which are in statement form, is the quantitative research design way of gathering data. In qualitative research, there is the interview guide, and here in question form. No? So interviews are the backbone of qualitative research. Later on, you'd realize in the operationalization talk that you have to triangulate these. There has to be 3 data sets, and therefore one interview is not enough. Okay. But a good interview is neither casual chat nor an interrogation. It's a structured conversation. And structured that invites participants to tell their stories with depth and authenticity. Uh, Normally, there is a set of open-ended questions, but if you're operating on limited time, I always say leading questions. No, they would say it should be non-leading prompts, but my claim there is it has to be always leading. No, so that you always are able to translate the response in terms of the conceptual framework. And we'll look at that in the conceptualization phase or as early as the conceptualization phase. Okay? So, but you have to ask follow-up questions to encourage reflection, and that it has to be done in a comfortable pacing to respect also your participant storytelling rhythm. Uh, so you cannot simply say, tell me about your first semester, or that's the start of the question, but it's poor if you say, so you felt excluded then, right? That's not just leading, it's a instigating question. I don't think there's something wrong that it's leading. I think what's wrong there is that it's instigating. Okay? So sample interview guide, consider this research question. How do first generation students experience belonging to in campus, on campus? And a well-defined interview guide will have this, no? An opening question, an experience probe, what experience made you feel included or excluded? A definition question, how do you personally define belonging? A critical incident, describe a moment when you felt you didn't belong. Or a support system, what support systems have been meaningful? Notice how these questions invite stories, not statistics. They create space for participants to reflect, to elaborate, and share experiences in their own words. And each question builds on the previous one, creating a natural conversation. Now, qualitative research is unique because it's not simply about counting voices, but about listening deeply to voices that matter. This approach requires patience, it requires empathy, and genuine curiosity about participants' lived experiences. So when you create your interview guide, ask yourself a critical question. If someone only answered these questions, would I have material sufficient to answer my research question? If the answer is no, then you have to revise the question. But if the answer is yes, then you've created an instrument capable of regenerating meaningful insights. In qualitative work, rigor comes not from numbers, but from depth, care, respect for participants' experiences, quality over quantity, insight over breadth, understanding over measurement. For lesson 6, which is also due next week, start again with your research questions. Return to qualitative research questions from your first lesson, and then create questions that invite storytelling and rich description. Please ensure alignment, so put it in tabular form. Each question must connect to the research question and purpose, and submit your work. There will, because this is just one lecture for 5 and 6, so we will begin first with the first part of your submission will be the quantitative side. The second part will be the quantitative side. But we're not yet done. Uh, Now that you have explored both quantitative surveys and qualitative interviews, we can now examine how these approaches differ fundamentally in their goals, designs, and execution. Look at quantitative research there, no? There, palakihin ko lang, sorry. There. Quantitative research is interested with generalization across population. Qualitative research is interested with deep understanding of experiences. Quantitative research is larger. Qualitative research is smaller. Data type is numerical and standardized. There are standardized tests. Data type in qualitative research is textual narratives and even observations. Here, it's very statistical. The other one, very thematic. Here, very close-ended and structured. Here, it's open-ended and flexible. Here, the goal is to be generalizable, representative. Here, you look at those who have information or expertise. Take note, neither approach is inherently superior. Your research question determines which method or combination of methods is most appropriate. So common pitfalls to avoid in quantitative research: use convenient samples but claiming generalizability. No, no, no. Writing ambiguous or double-barreled survey questions. No, no, no. Failing to pilot test your survey because later on in the operationalization phase, you'd realize if you create your questionnaire, you have to pre-test those for reliability and validity. Including too many items, leading the respondent fatigue. No, no. Ignoring missing data patterns that may indicate bias. Those are no in quantitative research. In qualitative research, asking leading questions so as to impose your assumptions is a no. That's just not correct. Conducting interviews that are too brief for depth, no? Parang you're always in a hurry, just 2 minutes interview. No, you cannot have a 2-minute interview, sadly. Uh, Failing to establish rapport with participants, not allowing silence, rushing to fill in conversation pauses, stopping data collection before reaching saturation. No? So here you'd see in quantitative research, I said a while ago, validity, reliability. But here in qualitative research, that's not a question because the issue more is the data saturated? Remember, awareness of these mistakes helps you design more rigorous studies from the outset. Learn from others' errors rather than repeating them. Uh, of course, there are ethical considerations. Whether conducting surveys or interview, the ethics of research will be put in place. There is a PIRC talk on the research ethics, but these are just some. Like informed consent, participants should understand the study's purpose, procedure, and the right to withdraw. If they say they don't like to be interviewed anymore, they can say that. Confidentiality, how will you protect their identities and sensitive information? Uh, Voluntary participation, no coercion or undue pressure. Minimizing harm, considering potential risks, including emotional distress. And data security, how will you store the data and how will you handle research data? Uh, in Pan Pacific Q, we always have to obtain research board clearance before collecting data, especially for human subjects. And that isn't just bureaucracy, it's fundamental ethical practice. No? The dean, I took Dr. Danilo, I first hired Dr. Danilo Alterado to become the director for the research ethics. But then eventually the school gave him a second task, which is the dean of the graduate school, but he was first employed as research ethics, and therefore he's still research ethics director, no? Which means still under my lead as vice president for research. So, but here it's very interesting to consider power dynamics. Are you researching vulnerable populations? How might your position as a researcher influence participants? These are very, very important research questions to consider. A few practical tips for success. So pilot test everything always. Test your survey or interview guide with a small group before you do full deployment. Revise based on the feedback about clarity, length, and flow. Uh, Document your process. Everything document. Keep detailed records of your methodological decisions, sampling procedures, and any deviation from your original plan. This will support transparency and even replicability. Prioritize quality also. Better to have fewer high quality responses than many rushed or incomplete ones. Create conditions that encourage thoughtful consideration. Plan sufficiently. Data collection always takes longer than expected. Build buffer time into your research timeline. Uh, for follow-ups, for unexpected challenges, plan. No? Practice active listening too, especially in interviews. Focus on truly hearing participants rather than mentally preparing your next question, following interesting threads that emerge. And remain flexible. Be prepared to adapt your approach if initial results suggest your questions aren't capturing what you intended. Remember, always, no? Especially in the qualitative realm, no? In the qualitative realm, research is iterative, no? Iterative process. That means it's like it's evolving, it's alive. No? It's alive. Looking ahead, this will help you operationalize the skills you've developed in these two lessons: designing representative samples, crafting precise survey items, and creating thoughtful interview guides form the foundation for rigorous empirical research. But data collection is only the beginning. The members you gather through surveys, the numbers you gather through surveys, and the narratives you collect through initial interviews are raw material waiting to be transformed into insights. And in the upcoming lessons, as you know already, we'll explore how to analyze qualitative and quantitative data through statistical methods and how to identify themes and patterns in qualitative transcript. Remember, good data collection makes analysis possible. Poor data collection makes even the most sophisticated analysis meaningless. So, what are your key takes away from this lesson? First, in qualitative sampling strategy matters. In quantitative research, representativeness allows generalization. In qualitative research, purposeful selection enables depth. Both require deliberate, justified choices. Design drives data quality. Whether creating surveys or interview guides, careful design aligned with your research question determines the quality of data you'll collect. Methods match questions. Your research questions should drive your methodological choices, not the other way around. Use quantitative methods for questions about how much or how many. Use qualitative methods for questions about how and why. And then ethics comes first. Protecting participants, maintaining research integrity aren't optional. They're fundamental requirements that shape every aspect of your study. This is my last slide. You've now explored the fundamental tools of empirical research, quantitative surveys, qualitative interviews. These methods, when applied with rigor and care, empower you to answer important questions and even contribute meaningful knowledge to your field. Remember, numbers without representative samples are mere anecdotes. Surveys without clear alignment produce meaningless data. Interviews without depth miss the richness of human experience. Both approaches done well contribute essential knowledge. Continue refining your methodological skills through practice, feedback, and reflection. Read exemplary studies in your field to see these principles in action. Read, I'll tell you. I know when you don't read. I know if it's ChatGPT that is responding to my assignments. I know. I'll tell you na. Uh, Most importantly, no? I mean, good essay, no? Having taught at the Ateneo for 15 years before I left Ateneo. I know. Uh, uh, Most importantly, approach your research with intellectual humility, with genuine curiosity. The best researchers remain students in all their lives. Complete both Canvas tasks before moving on to the lessons next week. Remember Friday next week, that's the face-to-face. These practical exercises that I've given will cement your understanding and give you artifacts you can build upon future research problems. Thank you very much for bearing with lesson 5 and lesson 6. We will resume again with lesson 7, 8, 9 next meeting. Thank you very much and have a nice day, everyone.